November 1st. It was really nice that November 1st happened to land on a Saturday, because that's the day of the main Day of the Dead, depending on when you start your 24-hour period. But this will be at Edgewood College. It'll be open to the public, free and open to the public, and I hope you all can come. And I should say the film, I'm going to show you a chapter in a minute, but I decided, my last film was like a documentary, and I found that as I watched the thing a lot, because every time I present it, I watch it again. And I find that like, after a while, I don't like to listen to what the people are saying. I just want to listen to the music and watch the pictures. So I said on this last film, I wanted to try to tell this story with the images and very, very few words, similar to the way the trailer just has a couple of words up there and then shows the story, and that's what the goal is on this film, to make the whole thing very experiential rather than kind of, it's not a narrative about, it's about what does this feel like, and so that's what I'm trying to pull across in the film and in the exhibition. So the film will be November 1st, and it'll be about 45, 50 minutes long, but along with this, starting in September, I'm going to do an exhibition, and the exhibition will be taking this film and projecting it onto multiple layers of fabric. It'll be in a gallery about this size, a little bit taller ceilings, and so it'll have the sound, but it'll be something that you can walk in and walk around. You're probably not going to sit there and watch the whole thing for 50 minutes. But this is kind of a mock-up of it, is that it's being projected onto multiple layers of fabric, where this is kind of this metallic silk organza that I've used, that as you project on it, you get a very clear image of whatever you're projecting. But because the fabric's so open, the light passes through and will also project onto the layer behind it. And so it goes a couple layers back, then it'll go to one here that's a solid piece that's done with embroidery. I'm having Miriam, who is the one whose grandmother's graves that we worked on. She's going to be doing embroidery all over that, sort of in this size with some cut work. And so some of the image will be projected onto fabric that she's made, and then also going back onto some other layers of hand-woven fabric from some of the weavers, from some of the other altars that we were looking at will be on there. And by the time you're back to the very back wall, it's mostly shadow. So this will be pretty deep, like, from more than halfway through the room back to the back wall, which means you can move in and out and around these, which for me is what it feels like when I'm down there. It's like I'm not standing here looking at that. I'm moving around, and my shadow is also part of what's being cast into the exhibition as well. So this will open September 15th, something like that, 27th. I don't remember. I had the date on the last one. I don't remember the last date. I just know it has to be done by then. And so there'll be a kind of a reception with that, and it'll be open on, hey ladies, it'll be open running for about a month and a half long. So it'll be open all the way through the month of October as well. So I'm going to show you, this is the first time I've shown actually no one has seen this except me and my editor who's in Portugal, who sent this to me last night, the latest version. It's not the final version, but it's very close. So this is one of the chapters. It's one of the chapters where they do an all-night vigil. And it's about 8 minutes long, and I'm going to run it through. But when you watch it, imagine it being projected on multiple layers of fabric, and that you can kind of walk in and out through this. So here we go. You ready? See how it works. If it starts jumping, I might shift it. No, we're good. I'm not sure yet about the ending. So the other part of it, so imagine that on layers of it. The ending, we're not sure about that. We just put that smell in there, and I'm not sure if that's a little too strong. But I kind of like it because it's funny, so we'll see. I don't know what that'll turn into. But so just imagine that sort of being on layers of fabric and walking through the middle of that, casting shadows, having that being cast on top of you as you walk through. And then the other part of this will be something that actually I hope maybe some of you might participate in, as doing a group altar similar to what I showed at the beginning of the slideshow, and asking people if you would like to take part in that. We're going to, Edgewood College will supply you. There's a box back there. Michaela, would you pull that box behind you up to the table? And yeah, you can just like be Carol Merrill and point it out. Yeah. So they'll give a box that size to anyone that would like to participate, and within that you can build your own altar in whatever way you want. If there's a group of at least like 5 or more people, I can come give like a little presentation about what this is about. Not about like I'm making a Mexican altar, but how you take the idea of this and interpret it in your own way. So we're hoping to get about 80 people to build these, and that will be like in the atrium area outside of the gallery in Edgewood College, and it'll happen October 3rd through November 7th. So it'll be up during the film premiere on November 1st, but it'll also be open for gallery night, which I think is April 5th, something like that. It's a Friday night. It'll be also open for gallery night. So if anybody wants to participate on that, I have some cards in the back that have the website for this on there, and there's a sign-up form. You can just leave your name and your information, and then we can get back to you so that you can, we can get a box to you, and you can kind of do whatever you would like within that. So anyway, so that's like, I can't believe it. I never talk less than I have time for. I have a couple students here who can attest to that. But I would love to have like some feedback from you or some thoughts and answer questions. Any? Yes, Any thoughts or questions on anything? Yes.
Well, I was going to say that for me, I studied abroad in Mexico, and the thing that I always tell people when they say, what did you love about Mexico, I always say it was the music and the colors. So I think that for me, like that really captured that. I mean, it's just beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
So I loved it. So great job.
Thanks.
And also, I had a question. Were people, I mean, were you sort of like a bystander where you weren't really integrated in, like where they didn't even notice you videotaping it, or did you have to talk to people first, or they forget you were there? I mean, this seems like, in some ways, it's very public, but at the same time, it's a, you know, like maybe again, I'm thinking about it as someone from the United States, like it's a more of a private experience. I'm wondering, was everyone very open to being videotaped?
Right. And that's a really good question, and actually there's a lot of sensitivity within that, because you can't just walk in and stick a camera in front of people's faces. And there's a couple that, the very last scene, at the scene of the chapter that we just showed where the cemetery was almost empty, and there were just, when people were starting to leave, there was like some person, some tourist, like with a camera like this in front of some lady, and I didn't say anything, but I almost went up and like hollered at them and said, what do you think you're doing, you know? And so part of it is you have to be thinking about that, you know, this is like, imagine that you're sitting there doing this. The few things, like the very first time I went down there, I was really nervous about like walking through, and like I was so careful to not walk on a grave, because that's like, oh my God, you don't walk on a grave, right? And then I'm watching everybody, and there are like kids jumping on them. And it's like, okay, so I guess I'll do that. And so, because they're really tight together, they're not like in neat little rows. They're, you know, you can barely get through some of them, and then there's stuff in the middle of them. I mean, it's kind of hazardous walking around. And so you do begin to just sort of walk around. I would almost always talk to somebody first. I had a wonderful crew, and I think that made a huge difference. My crew were Mexicans and really sweet, friendly, kind people who were interested in everything. So especially Luke, he has 2 names, Alex, who is the videographer, would be very good at walking up to people ahead of time, and we would just talk to people whether we were going to film them or not. And you would just walk up and you'd say, everybody says buenas noches to each other, almost always. And so you'd say hello, or you'd say good evening, and then, you know, you might say something, wow, that's beautiful, or something, and people would generally start talking. There were some people that didn't want to be filmed, and some people didn't want to. There was one guy who was singing at his grave next to his wife for a long time, and Luke asked him, he said, is it okay if I tape you? And he said, no, I really don't want to. But then they sat and had a conversation for 20 minutes afterwards. And so I think the important part was that we weren't just there grabbing the stuff and leaving, but that we were trying very much to be respectful of the people. And people generally were very, very chatty, but I think it was somewhat our approach to them too. But they were much more open than I expected to be. I've gone to other places. I was in Chiapas last summer, and they were having some festival. Nobody wanted to talk to me, so I was like, okay, I'm not gonna, you know. But it was very different here. They were, for the most part, in the towns. And we tended to be, I filmed mostly in towns where there weren't a lot of tourists, because there are some that, like, there's one that was so big that they were actually charging 5 pesos to get into the cemetery, and you had to have a wristband. And because, you know, it was like, okay, that's a whole different thing. But then it's like really full of tourists. But we went mostly to ones that were smaller. And I think that we sat for a long time, and we would wait, and people just liked talking for the most part. And I wasn't recording people's voices. I don't know why I felt like I didn't want to have that as part of this, but people said, you know, in the conversations, they would say really beautiful things to me about what they were talking about. They loved to talk about who this was or why they decided to do this, the grave the way it was. So it was a great way to hear stories. But I think we tried very hard to be, you know, trying to sort of be there as, we weren't participants, but we were being there and present in the moment and not just trying to get our shot, because that would have been really rude. Yeah.
I have one other question.
Sure.
About the classes.
Yeah.
Something that will be just sort of like more geared towards adults, or is that something that like school children would?
I'd say anybody that wants to do it, like if there's a group of kids that wants to do a box together, or if there's a school or a community group that either want to do one or do several, and I think it's open to interpretation. However, you know, I've seen like the ones that happen at Mattie Road, some would be like, you know, I did something for my grandmother, and somebody else did something for people that are feeling a sense of loss. There's one where they wrote something on a piece of paper and you put it in, and it was on paper that would melt in the water, and so when they put it into the water, the name disappeared, and that was really beautiful. That was a wonderful installation. Other people did things like for some political thing going on, or the disappeared people in Chile or something like that. People had different things that they put up. The very first year that I did this, the day I was going to, it was a Tuesday, I think it was a Wednesday morning, I was going to be presenting this project, doing the altar project, and I had a thing where the students did a group picture on the other side too, where we all did textile stuff. And the day I did it was, September 12th, the day after 9/11. So that changed the whole thing too. Like, and then it was going to be one thing, and it became something completely different because 9/11 happened the day before I was going to talk about it, and I couldn't talk about making a altar about death without dealing with that. So yeah.
Yeah, I'm a little confused.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for the presentation.
Uh-huh.
But is this just for the walkthrough that you talked about, or if it's a film, or it's going to be a film apart, are you going to have dialogue? And also the unfinished chapter like you had there?
Mm-hmm.
You know, a lot of people, when they play that, they don't translate the words of a song.
There's a couple of them would be good to, like Pollito con Papas would be really good. If you speak Spanish, that's way funnier.
Right. And then also, I'm just curious, why, I think of that title, it seems a little bit out of sync. La Vida y los Muertos, instead Los Vivos y los Muertos, or La Vida y la Muerte, or El Día de la Muerte.
Yeah.
This just seems like it's
off.
That title doesn't.
Yeah, I think I actually thought of it that way specifically because it's like life and the dead. It's not about the dead and the living, it's about life in general and dealing with the dead. So it was actually conscious choice to do that. Yeah. It was thinking about it, because I think for me it's how they're dealing with the dead, like teaches me something about my life and how I live. And so it was actually a very conscious choice to have that in there. So
what about, is it going to be a movie?
There's three, but that's actually a good question because, you know, partly I showed this clip and we have a few minutes and that's one chapter. I'm not sure about the ending. It's like, maybe I can't decide if that's like too much, but curious what people's feedback are. And could you get enough of a story on that without any dialogue to stay engaged for that 8 minutes? Or does it need words with it too? Or more words on screen?
In that little dialogue, that was very helpful. That was interesting. We give the people, I thought that would continue like that.
Which, well, there's just a few words here and there at the beginning?
Yeah.
So maybe a couple more later on?
Right.
Yeah, because you're kind of like the test group on this. Yeah, so maybe a few more words every once in a while, or something like all the way till dawn or something might happen. Yeah. Any other thoughts or questions? Yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned that you were researching Oaxaca,
Mhm.
you worked with them about the Vida Muertos.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about how that evolved?
Yeah, well, so some of it is like from working with Maddie Rhodes is actually what got me my first trip to go along to Oaxaca to be able to deal better with that project. It was a faculty development thing at the Kansas City Art Institute when I was there, and that's what first got me down there. But then I found this whole, I was a textile person, and I had lived for a while in a community where we were making stuff and going off and selling it out in the mountains and all this stuff. So I got to this place and I was like, wow, there's so many connections. Also, Day of the Dead happens in the middle of school year. You can't get there. If it had happened in the summer, I would have been there a long time before, but I couldn't ever get there because it's hard to leave during classes. So for that reason, I didn't go for a long time, but it was something that still totally intrigued me. And there's lots of this, when I'm working with artisans, so this whole thing developed with them, and I've done lots of many different projects with them, which is like a whole nother lecture, so I won't go into that. But and then made a film about how it was more about their lives than it was about how I work with them, but there's a little bit how I work with them in there. But what happens a lot is, time is just really different there. People sit and they talk and they sit for longer and they do things that take a really long time, and it doesn't upset them the way it does us, So you talk a lot, and people would always talk about Day of the Dead, no matter what, it came up in conversations all the time, and I would always say, oh, I gotta get down here, I gotta get down here, I gotta get down here. And I couldn't get out of school for a week in order to do that. And finally I said, I'm going to do this because I really need to go do this. And I wanted to do some kind of project about it because I was so intrigued by the idea. But, there's hours of stories of people talking about death in their town, and they don't, they actually dig up their graves because they bury people on top of each other in the same place, and they actually find that for them it's respectful that the family themselves dig up your ancestor's bone instead of some strangers, which totally freaks me out. But when they explain it that way, it's like, well, that makes sense, So it was lots and lots of hearing stories and long conversations and about stuff that would normally make us kind of squeamish, but I found it totally fascinating. But then this whole play of it was like Christmas, or if I'd go there around Christmas time, they'd say, oh, you should come back for Day of the Dead. This is nothing, And that came up a lot. And so hearing that made me really want to go down there and deal with this. And I wanted to do something specifically about it. And then once I got down there, I started feeling what I wanted it to feel like, what it felt like, and how I wanted to try to express it. This whole thing that's happening as Edgewood is sort of developed over a couple of years. It was originally just going to be a film, but that didn't seem sensual enough and interactive enough to just have it that way. And so I think there's 3 parts to it, to answer your question. It's kind of confusing, which is true. There's 3 parts. There's a film that can live on its own. There's an exhibition that can also live on its own, but the film will be part of that. It'll be projected onto it. But I don't think anybody's going to sit in the gallery and watch 40 minutes of it. It's something you should be able to walk in at any moment, walk around for 5 minutes and leave, because that's what you do in a gallery. But telling the whole story takes much longer, so that'll work sort of as in a unit by itself. And then just onto this, as long as we got people in a gallery and as long as we're doing this, let's do the community project too. And so we built that. That was when Edgewood came on, that became a part of it. It was something I really wanted to do. So there's 3 parts. So it should be confusing.
That was a great mystery to me too. Like I said, the Day of the Dead is only one day long.
That's right.
But how did you travel all around and get these photos?
Oh, well, that's what's interesting about it, is it's only 24 hours, but it doesn't all happen at the same time. So this one, the dead, they go to the cemetery first, and then they go, in Mitla, they go to the cemetery around 10 or 11, clean up the graves, and then they go back to the house at noon. But in Teotitlan, which is about 20 minutes the other way, that happens at 3. So you can go over there, you go over this one, then you go to this one at 3. And then the thing at night where they're dancing all night, that happens a different night than the one that we just saw when they're in the candle. So they all have a 24-hour period, but they don't all happen at the same time. And this one that does the really fancy flower things, their dead come a day later than everybody else's, which is really convenient. Yeah, so I could get to that and spend all day there. And also this is also why it took 2 years of filming. I couldn't be in that many places at once. So I did some of the filming 1 year and then came back and grabbed other things the next year. Like I knew for sure I needed Dawn